Welcome back to the channel. My name is Coach Jordan Hardgrave. I wanted to read you a win real quick, which a win in my program is anything that's just going good in recovery, right? And this person had a really big win, and people have been having wins every week for years and years now. And I've got like 7 or 8, actually, probably close to 10 recovery interviews that I just haven't uploaded. I haven't edited them for a lot of reasons. I've fallen behind on a lot of things. Helping people suffering with these symptoms is very, very in depth, and also try to have a good work-life balance. And just somewhere in the midst of that, a lot of things started to fall behind. So I'm going to try to do a better job at sharing some of these wins with you and some of these recovery stories and just all those things, because I want to show you that you can do this. Like, it's possible. Okay. And the number one fear that people have with depersonalization, realization specifically, is that the symptoms are going to be forever, right? That they're permanent. But I have been able to beat them. And that's one thing, right? Just some random guy from Arkansas. But I've been helping people beat these symptoms for, I think it's definitely, I think, 6 years. It might be going on 7. But anyway, I've got hundreds and hundreds of screenshots. And again, I'm going to create a website where my clients can just look at that. And even you guys can look at that, because the stories of hope, the stories of people taking screenshots of them on their wedding day and on vacation and enjoying their life and just slowly but surely getting their life back. That is why I do what I do. But anyway, let's read it real quick. Of course, I'll keep their name private. I've been 2 weeks in the program, and I am already having, I think they meant to say having big breaks from depersonalization realization. I used to have it really bad at night watching TV and before sleep, but now it's practically gone. Okay. So you may hear that and think there's no way that that's true. No, it's real. And I also want to clarify, like, that's not common. Like, I don't want to create a false picture here that if you work with me, you can expect to get rid of your symptoms in 2 weeks. In fact, usually it takes several months. And that's actually what I want to talk about. But I just wanted to show you that whenever you actually understand the root of what's going on, the symptoms will go away. Okay. But what I want to emphasize is that the symptoms are not just going to go away if you really deal with the root, but they're going to stay away. So if somebody were to work with me, is it going to be harder than probably any other program that is out there? Yeah, for sure. Are we going to address more things than anybody else that you're going to work with? Yeah. Are you going to have to face your body? Yeah. Are you going to have to set up boundaries in life? Yeah. Are you going to have to make lifestyle adjustments? Yeah. Are you going to have to learn how to self-regulate? Yeah. You're going to have to face your sensory triggers. Yeah. But your results are going to last. And so many people define recovery as the most recent, largest break that they've had from symptoms. I don't define recovery as that. And the example that, if you follow me, you've heard me say before, is, let's say that, God forbid, you're in a car accident and you have tons of scrapes and bruises and even like a gash, and your body is just full of pain. And you go to the hospital and they put you under anesthesia or just something that just numbs all the pain. Well, could you say that you're symptom free? Yeah. But have you really dealt with what's happening? Or, well, you know what I mean by that. Like, your body's naturally going to heal it. But have the things happening in the body been dealt with truly? No. So, especially with distraction, which is not recovery at all. That's just getting so deep in your head that you lose what's called interoception, which is the experience of the embodied self. You basically get results by way of what's called somatic dissociation. And it's like impossible to tell these people that they're not recovered, because they define recovery as the symptoms being gone. That's what I did too. And if you didn't deal with the root of the things happening in the body, especially, but also if you didn't go through the process of getting the right information, believe it or not, neuroscience matters. Understanding how your brain, body, and nervous system work is very, very important because it puts a period to where there was a question mark. A lot of these irrational fears that come in is because there's the absence of the right information. You also need to face your triggers, very important, but not just sensory triggers, sometimes somatic triggers, sometimes your body, right? For example, but not limited to this, I had a severe heartbeat phobia. And I hated the feeling of my heartbeat. I was terrified that my heart was going to stop all the time. And so I felt like I had to monitor it. So I'd feel my pulse and then I'd feel it for one beat and then I'd pull my finger away. And I remember one time my mom saw that and she was like, "Are you anxious?" And I was so embarrassed. And I was like, "No, I'm fine." But I was anxious. And I remember hundreds of times over the years trying to do the freaking blood pressure monitor. And as soon as the cuff would get tight, I would freak out and I'd have to hit the release valve. And even at Walmart, which here in Arkansas, we go to Walmart a lot. But they have this little seat thing where it's got, you might have done it before. You put your arm in there, it's got a red button, a green button, and my dad would do it and he would be super calm. And then I would put my arm in there and I'd be like, this is the time I'm going to do it. But my body would be tightening up and then I'd feel my heartbeat, especially once it had pressure on your arm, and I would hit the release valve and I would just feel like such a failure. But for me to recover, I had to start facing my body. For me to get rid of that heartbeat phobia, which was one of the many layers that was leading to the traumatic, overwhelming stress that was producing the DPDR and other trauma symptoms. And so I had to sit and feel my heartbeat while calming my body over and over again. And that was one of the most excruciatingly painful processes that I've ever been through. And you can do it in short bursts, by the way. It doesn't have to be all at once. But I desensitized it. And I had a bunch of phobias and a bunch of things that I had to desensitize. I always tell my clients, like, I wasn't even aware that I had a body. Like, I was just like a brain floating around, or a mind. Like, I did not have interoception, which, again, is the experience of the embodied self. And whenever you go through a lot of painful experiences, your brain creates what's called a sensory trigger, which is a piece of sensory data that is now conditioned to be associated with threat because of your painful experience. And now into the future, unless you know how to desensitize it, that sensory trigger is going to be constantly deploying fight or flight, and maybe even the freeze response if you're overwhelmed by stress, every time that you're around that sensory data. And it usually starts out with just fight or flight response, what we would call anxiety. But the way that neural pathways work is the more that they fire, the stronger that they get, and the more efficient that they get at putting your body into whatever response is associated. It's technically called a procedural memory with that sensory data, right? And over time, before you know it, you don't have a neural pathway, you have a neural highway, which are very strong neural connections of threat association with the sensory data around you. And you don't even know that this is happening until fear kicks in. So I've got a book on my shelf back there. I've actually got 2 copies. I think I ordered it like maybe 4 years ago, and I think I forgot I ordered it, so I ordered it again. But it's called Anxious by Joseph Ledoux. And good luck reading that, by the way. You're going to hear that, oh, that'll be a great... I barely understand what the heck he's talking about. But I read it so much that eventually I started to pick up on a little bit. And he was on the Joe Rogan podcast one time too. And even that was very difficult to understand. Like, these brilliant academics have a very difficult time kind of dumbing it down for the average person like me. And that's why I really love Andrew Huberman. I was just listening to his podcast, and he really takes neuroscience and breaks it down to like practical application, everyday language. But Joseph Ledoux is pretty much the world's leading neuroscientist when it comes to fear and threat detection. And he says, fear is not actually an emotion like we've thought. Fear is whenever you consciously become aware that your body is in fight or flight response and you have a sense of danger. But prior to fear kicking in, follow me. We're going to go deep for a second, but it's important that you know this. This revolutionized my understanding, and it really gave a lot of context as to what happened with me with the stress building up. And it also helps my clients a lot once they understand this. prior to fear kicking in, your body is still going into fight or flight response, but you don't even know it. You're not consciously aware of it. And so what that means for you, and used to be me, is that you can be carrying around a lot of stress that you literally have no feeling of. You don't feel stressed and no conscious awareness of what's going on. And if you followed me long enough, you've heard me talk about these experiments, but just in case you haven't heard me talk about this, I want to talk about it because it's like probably the most significant experiment that I've ever came across in my work of doing this for about 6 years. And Joseph Ledoux talks about this. It might not be an anxious, but I feel like he does talk about this study. But they put people in front of screens, let's just say television screens for the sake of example, and they subliminally flashed a picture of a snake or a spider, which are original triggers. That's not a conditioned stimulus, right? You've heard of Dr. Ivan Pavlov, the famous, was he a psychiatrist or it doesn't matter. But anyway, he would ring a bell and then he would feed dogs. And over time, he could just ring the bell and the dogs would start to salivate. They literally hooked up these little tubes to the dog's salivary glands. And so that was a previously neutral stimulus that got conditioned to be associated with eating over time to the point that you could just ring a bell and the dogs would start salivating, wanting to eat. And I remember my grandpa used to feed catfish and he would stomp on the dock and the catfish would just start coming up, right? So that's a conditioned stimulus. But our ancient ancestors in the cave people days, they figured out that if you mess with that little slithery thing or that little fuzzy looking thing that looks cute and cuddly, you're going to die. And so that's a whole nother subject, but it's an original trigger, meaning that this is something that 100% of human beings are afraid of. Because if they tried to use a conditioned stimulus, well, then it wouldn't work. The experiment wouldn't make any sense. They needed to guarantee that this is going to stress that person out. And so anyway, so they subliminally flashed a picture of the snake and spider, meaning below the level of conscious awareness. And they asked the person or the people, did you see anything? And they said no. And then they asked them, do you feel any different? And then they said no. But yet they had them hooked up to brain mapping, an oximeter, blood pressure monitor, and their breathing rate had gone up. Their blood pressure had gone up. The amygdala was firing, sending a threat signal to the sympathetic nervous system. Their body was going into fight or flight response, and they couldn't feel it, and they didn't even know it. So let's tie this back to what we're talking about here. Most likely, okay, I do work with some people where they had a really stress-free life for the most part, and then they had what's called a major trauma, a sudden state of overwhelming stress, and that's what triggered DPDR. But even those people, they might have been stressed out and they didn't even realize it. But for most of the people that I work with, it's really a complex trauma situation. It's been slow building up of stress and adversity over a long period of time, but your body starts to go into fight or flight response and you don't even know that it's happening. And by the time that fear kicks in, which is whenever that fight or flight response, the awareness intrudes into your conscious awareness, you're already carrying a lot of stress, way more than you realize. So a lot of people say, oh, well, these symptoms just came out of nowhere. Probably not. Okay, you probably have been a lot more stressed out than you've realized. Even if you had a relatively good upbringing, that doesn't guarantee that you're not going to have really adverse reactions to your environment. You don't have to grow up in an abusive environment to be stressed out in that environment, right? If you don't know how to self-regulate, that alone could cause you to end up being pretty stressed. So that's one layer as to why we have to deal with what's happening in the body is you've probably been carrying around a lot of stress for a long time and you have tons of sensory triggers, most of which you're not aware of, that need to be desensitized. But then another layer of this, it goes even deeper. Let's say that you were stressed out and you would have identified as an anxious person. So that means fear had kicked in. Even for you, though, by the time that depersonalization, realization showed up, you were still carrying around a lot more stress and fatigue and probably suppressed emotion than you realize, because you started to participate in dissociative and mitigating behaviors. Dissociate means to separate. It comes from a Latin root word that means to sever or separate. And we're wired for homeostasis. We're wired for balance. And whenever we get off balance, we want to try to get back into balance. And so you, as a good person who wanted to feel better, by the way, this is not to create any shame. In fact, it's opposite of that. It's to strip away shame. You started to do things to mentally check out. You started to watch social media or video games or constantly on your phone all the time. Most of my clients, whenever they come to work with me, they are addicted to their phone. Why? Because if I am in my head, and getting dopamine for sure, but it's also a way to get into their head, I don't have to experience my embodied self. And they probably don't even realize that they're doing this. Now, the way that, a procedural memory works, let's say driving is a good example of a procedural memory. It's a subconscious physiological association. You don't even realize you're doing it a lot of times. It usually doesn't start out like that, with like these dissociative and mitigating behaviors, right? So let's say, you feel stress. Let's say fear had kicked in. And you're like, you know what? I'm just going to get on my phone. And you start to, you make that connection. You know what? I get on my phone and I feel better. I feel less stressed whenever I just scroll and kind of doom scroll, mentally check out for hours. And it starts as a conscious, intentional choice. But over time, because our brain is always looking to make things subconscious, your brain's like, you know what? This is now the norm. So let's just create a procedural memory for this. And now the default setting is for you to look to this thing to get you relief. And you're not even consciously aware of that you're doing it. All of a sudden you just find yourself on TikTok or on YouTube for hours, or playing video games or watching Netflix or whatever your thing is. Pick your poison, right? Could be alcohol, could be vaping, smoking, could be unhealthy food, could be so many things, right? You're doing things to separate from the pain of your body being in fight or flight, either by directly numbing the body or just checking out of the body, doing dissociative behaviors, okay? And so for us to truly get you free of this in the long term, first we've got to get you checked back in your body. And I tell people progressive muscle relaxation is a really great technique for that. You just slowly squeeze and release different muscle groups. Really great way to get you back in your body and calm your body. We got to get you back in your body. And then we have to get you starting to release that tension and relax your body throughout the day. And also a big thing I do with my clients is face their emotions. Emotions are experienced in the form of physical sensations in the body. And one reason that you may be mentally checking out and numbing yourself is because there's certain sensory triggers that are triggering emotion. It's trying to come up and you just stuff it down. And it causes these negative physical sensations to just be playing on repeat in your body. And you stuff it down. And the way that emotions work is they need to peak, get to max intensity, and then they can process and come down. It's like waves of the ocean, usually going to be big waves, smaller waves, and then it'll be done. But you've got emotion that probably needs to be processed. Also, adrenaline starts to be released. So if you find yourself getting impatient or angry, if you feel shaking in your body, you ever just your legs shaking, or you're just kind of like, you just can't sit still, or you feel this urge to flee. You feel like you could just run 20 miles or something like that. Or also feeling ants on your skin. Number one, how's your diet? Okay, it could be low blood sugar. So I've got a whole module in my program about nutrition. It's super important, okay? But assuming your diet's good, you're eating frequently enough, you're eating whole foods, pretty good diet. Well, that's that shaking and this anger. It's really your body telling you that there's a buildup of adrenaline, which is a stress hormone, probably cortisol too. But adrenaline, especially once that kicks in, it's very powerful and it can really put the body in a very uncomfortable state. And so really, by the way, if you ever feel shaking, allow that to happen. That's your body naturally trying to discharge that adrenaline. But there's also different techniques that, I work with my clients with to release that, even if you did suppress the shaking. But, I'll have my clients do just fast motion exercises or exercises designed to induce shaking so they can get rid of that energy. That takes time. Okay. So another thing too is, like everybody always asks me, how do you recover? I'm telling you what to do right now. we need to set up some new boundaries in life. Okay? Like, your health has to be number one priority. I don't care what it costs you. I don't care if you have to walk away from a toxic family member. I don't care if you have to say no to people because you're a people pleaser. That's really hard. I was Mr. People Pleaser, and it's uncomfortable for you. You're not a machine. You have to learn to have boundaries. Okay? You have to start to listen to your body. I'm not saying that momentary times of pushing your body a little bit past its limits at the gym sometimes or running or whatever, like, I get that, build that mental callus, but your whole life doesn't need to be that. And some of you are like, no disrespect, but you're kind of running around like a chicken with its head cut off, as we would say here in Arkansas. Like, you're not getting good sleep. You are pushing your body well beyond its limits. And then you just drink coffee or Red Bull or energy drinks to try to manufacture that energy that you don't have. And this is not sustainable. And for some of you, that way of living, neglect, and I don't say this to bring shame, I say it to bring context, that neglect of the body is a big part of what caused the stress to build up. And you enter a state of traumatic stress, which is why dpdr kick in. You're so overwhelmed by stress. And I don't mean a panic attack. Whenever I say overwhelmed, I'm talking about your nervous system being overwhelmed, not you being overwhelmed, right? There's nuance, but there's a difference there. Your nervous system is overwhelmed if there's dpdr. That's why they're not symptoms of anxiety. Like, I don't watch people's videos anymore because it just drove me nuts. I haven't really done it in years, but if I hear that dpdr is a symptom of anxiety one more time, I'm going to go nuts, because it's not. It doesn't show up until the point of overwhelm. It's technically a different branch of the nervous system than anxiety. It's the dorsal vagal branch of the parasympathetic nervous system. Anxiety is sympathetic, right? Fight or flight. And I walked around with anxiety for years, but dpdr didn't show up until I had a panic attack from a bad marijuana experience, and I was pacing back and forth. At first, I tried to look to my friends, and I tried to get them to, give me that reassurance that I could get out of this by calling an ambulance. I was like, call an ambulance, I'm going to die. They wouldn't do that. I tried pacing back and forth because I remember I had the heartbeat phobia. I hated feeling my heartbeat, and my heart was pounding. I thought I was dying of a heart attack. And so trauma, if you look at Bessel van der Kolk and Dr. Peter A. Levine and some of these world-renowned trauma experts, Dr. Stephen Porges, right? Well, he's not necessarily a trauma expert. He's just like an amazing neuroscientist that founded the polyvagal theory. But regardless, they would say that trauma, it's very hard to define, but it happens at the point of overwhelm. Your ability to regulate and calm yourself is overwhelmed for whatever reason, okay? But I hit that point of overwhelm. And whenever you hit that point of overwhelm, your brain has a procedure for that. And it's called the freeze response. So a trauma response, freeze response, those are synonymous terms. It's also called the immobilization response, the shutdown response. That is basically the point where your nervous system is like, the ship is going down. Let's make this person's death by line as numb, as painless as possible. So you're experiencing depersonalization, realization, and probably other trauma symptoms too. Not always, but time may feel distorted. Your memory is thrown off, and you've also probably got anxiety symptoms too. Although in the deepest state of trauma, there's no anxiety at all. But regardless, and you're trying to explain to your friends and family, like this is not just anxiety. This is not just stress. You don't get it, especially if you've got a history of anxiety. Even from an experiential perspective, you see the difference here. You feel that, like, this is a whole nother level. Like, I can't even think. I can't even make it through the day with this stuff. Not trying to minimize anxiety. I lived with anxiety for 15 years. I used to have 20 panic attacks a day at one point in time. Anxiety sucks, but once you enter a trauma state and your brain is preparing as if you're about to be eaten by a lion, it is the most unbearable thing that you could ever imagine. But you can't see it on a test. I mean, technically, if you've got a brain scan, you would see that different parts of the brain are not lighting up and other parts are and things like that. But nobody's going to get that most of the time. And so your friends and family are looking at you and they're like, we got the CT scans, we got the MRIs, we got the blood work, you did the urine test, and everything's fine. And even though they may or may not verbalize it, most of the time they won't, they're kind of thinking that you're overreacting. And they may give you some looks, right? Most communication is nonverbal, right? And then you're suffering immensely. You're going through the biggest hell of your life that you've ever gone through. And also, we are wired for co-regulation. And so we're looking for people to validate our experience and to give us hope and calm. And you're not finding that. And then you get online and you watch video after video and you're looking at all these blogs and everybody says something different. And then you try these different programs and some of them are like, oh, just distract your mind. Other people like, it's all about accepting the symptoms, and you do all these things and then random list of positive activities. And maybe some of you got results with that early on, but you realize it's not going to work in the long term because you never dealt with the root. But regardless, you start to realize like this is a cluster. This is, I'm not going to say the F word, a cluster bleep. Like it's horrible. And people are caught in a cycle and they're not getting the help that they need. And then they go to a therapist or a psychiatrist, which you should do. Okay? That's important. But unfortunately, there's a huge gap in understanding right now whenever it comes to trauma in general, but especially depersonalization and realization. In fact, I did a poll on my YouTube channel like 4 years ago or so, and I asked people, like, how many of you went to a doctor or a licensed mental professional and they knew what dpdr even were? And I got to find the study. It's or not the study, but the poll. I may not even be able to find it, but I think it was like I'm gonna go low just to be conservative. I think it was something like 65 to 66% or something of people said that their doctor or licensed mental professional did not know what the symptoms were. Okay. And by the way, I'm not going to share too much about this, but this year I am going to begin the process of getting my license in mental health. I've decided I didn't do it for a long time or pursue it because what I'm doing is working. It's all based on evidence. I've got all the studies to back it up. I've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of screenshots backing up that it works. I've got all these recovery interviews. People are getting their lives back. It's working. And my thoughts are, why would I go through all that schooling just to teach the same stuff? But I'm realizing that I want to eventually, which I do, train therapists and psychiatrists and different ones and doctors that come to me as clients. But I feel like having my license in mental health will really open up a lot of doors as far as bringing reform when it comes to trauma and depersonalization, realization, things like that. I think it just would open up a lot of opportunity to help turn the tide on this, okay? But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I'm really excited about it. And but regardless, there's a huge gap in understanding, okay? And people are getting met with looks. And again, I love licensed mental professionals. Thank God for them. Thank God for doctors. I just went through a kidney stone. And by the way, if you've been through a kidney stone, I have a whole new level of respect for you. I had heard about them. I literally, I thought my body was dying. It wasn't anxiety or panic either. It was just like just constant in my left side pain for like 10, 12, 13 hours straight. Went to the hospital the first time and they didn't pick up on the kidney stone on the CT scan. I've got a client who's a doctor and he said that they didn't do it the right way. They were looking for diverticulitis, so they put a certain thing in my IV. Anyway, so then I go back home and then I thought I was getting better, and then all of a sudden I get hit with it again, go to a second hospital, and the first hospital that I went to sucks, and it's known locally as being horrible. But the second hospital, as soon as I got there, they put me on some sort of pain meds, and oh my gosh, I felt so much better. And then they actually found the kidney stone. But thank God that we have that. Thank God that we have doctors. Thank God that we have licensed mental professionals. But you can be a well-meaning, even well-trained overall, generally speaking, licensed mental professional or doctor, and still not have proper education about trauma. Which I know, me saying trauma, you're going to think a past event. It's not an event. It's a state of nervous system overwhelm. Okay? That's a 20th century understanding that it's a car accident, natural disaster, loss of a loved one. It's antiquated, and it is really sad because a lot of people are in a trauma state that haven't been through those events. I actually got a comment the other day. So if you're one of those people who's watching that you commented this, or you've been curious about this, they were like, how is it possible that we're going through depersonalization realization if we haven't been through any traumatic events? And I'm like, that exactly, right? It's that understanding, a 20th century understanding of trauma that is making you believe that there's no way that your DPDR could be trauma. But once we understand that trauma is a state of overwhelming stress in the nervous system, all of a sudden, you don't have to have gone through a car accident or a natural disaster or go off to war, right? I remember whenever I used to I don't talk much about what I do anymore. I just, for different reasons, it's just hard to explain to people. But I used to tell people what I do, and they'd be like, "Oh, so you probably work with war soldiers." I told them I help with trauma, and they're like, "Oh, okay, you probably work with war soldiers." And I'm like, I definitely get military. I just recently had a guy going through Navy SEAL school. Had a guy not long ago who uh, was like an army general or something. I've worked with lots of military, but mostly not. Mostly it's people, just everyday people. But you go to the doctor and they do all the tests and they keep saying there's nothing wrong with you, and you want there to be something wrong with you. It's like you would rather have a freaking disease or something objectively wrong than have this big question mark going on. Why am I suffering so much if there's not a tumor, or if there's not brain damage, or if there's not this thing or this thing? It really starts to drive people nuts. But again, that is why neuroscience matters, okay? You have to understand that you have had a painful history, and because maybe you were stressed out for a while and fear hadn't kicked in, but maybe once fear did kick in, you started to numb yourself and dissociate and live in your head all day. You're not aware of how severe the stress in your nervous system has been, okay? But going back to what I said at the beginning, we're going to have to do the work here. And most people, before they come to work with me, and I don't shame them. I used to be the same way, right? Like, what's the cookie cutter thing? What's the microwave thing rather? It's going to get me out of this the fastest. And you want to feel better, and I get that. But I love you too much to lie to you and tell you that there's a quick fix for this. You're going to have to get back in your body. You're going to have to make your body your safe place again. Again, you might have to walk away from some toxic or abusive people. You might have to change your lifestyle around quite a bit. We're going to have to prioritize sleep and nutrition and hydration. You're going to have to face your triggers, sensory triggers, somatic triggers, and you're going to have to face your symptoms too. This is where the acceptance stuff comes in. I do teach my clients to invite in their symptoms. In fact, I just had somebody post about that. Yeah, let me read this. So I'm not against acceptance. I'm against this belief that that's the singular thing that's going to deal with what's happening in the body and rewire your nervous system. It's just not the case. What you have with the acceptance movement are people who had severe anxiety, maybe traumatic stress, mostly just anxiety. I don't say just anxiety, minimize anxiety. You know what I mean? And they had a lot of resistance, and the primary layer of their anxiety was their resistance. So once they got rid of the resistance, there was a massive reduction in their stress. And so they basically were passionate to help people, and so they went around talking about acceptance. And thank God for that. There was a one point in time where acceptance saved my freaking life. It got rid of the panic attacks for a while. But not everybody has a lot of resistance, believe it or not. Some of my clients don't resist the symptoms at all. They've just learned to live with them. So, but anyway, again, recovery is like peeling an onion. I just realized I have super glue all over my hands. I was putting up that little blue light back there, and I glued it, and it got all over. Anyway, this person, they posted a win in my Rise program in the online course. They said, today I reminded myself of what Jordan said about inviting in the symptoms. I relaxed my body and I mentally invited the symptoms in and really tried to befriend the symptoms. It's incredible. I got a little glimmer of myself and my personality. And at the same time, I felt so relaxed in my body that I haven't felt in a long time. When I was driving in my car, I also recognized the feeling of this is my car. So I know this person, and they've been getting proper co-regulation. We meet 3 times a week with group coaching. They've got access to private coaching with me, which that's another thing too. And listen, I'm not here to try to sell you on working with me. And you don't want to work with me unless you're ready to put in the work. And I can't guarantee that I can help everybody, but I do want to let people know about this. I've had people watch my videos for years sometimes, and they're like, this is a long time ago. They're like, you never mentioned anything like your program or anything like that. I didn't know that you offered that. And I just don't want to come off as like I'm trying to like twist your, like, it's not like that at all. But we are changing lives. And if you want to apply to work with me, I'd love to take a look at your situation. I'm not ashamed to talk about a transformation that you could have. But anyway, this person, I've been giving them lots of co-regulation, and I've taught them how to self-regulate. They've been building interoception, the experience of the embodied self. They're making lots of lifestyle adjustments. They've got the co-regulation in their group calls, the private calls. And it's not just the invitation of symptoms that got them these results, where they got a glimmer of feeling normal. It was all these things together, these activities that communicate safety. I tell you, it's self-regulation, co-regulation, exposure, and then neuroscience, getting the right information. Which, if you watch these videos, you're going to get at least a lot of those things just from watching these videos for free, just so you know. I mean, obviously, I got to take a look at your situation. There's some things I can't do, and facing your triggers, that's obviously something that you got to work out. But the neuroscience of this, getting some co-regulation, that definitely in these videos is going to really help you a lot. But with that being said, he's doing the work. And yes, it takes more time. Yes, it's hard to get back into your body. Yes, it takes time to learn how to self-regulate. It takes time to face your triggers and do the exposure work. Yes, there is a cost with setting up boundaries in your life to make sure that you're not driving your body into the ground. But you are going to not just get free of the symptoms because you've dealt with the root, but you're going to stay free of the symptoms. When I wake up in the morning, I'm not like, oh my gosh, I hope the symptoms don't come back. I'm able to be free to enjoy my life, and I can do whatever I want. I can just sit there like right now. Like, I don't have to be distracted all the time. I can literally be present in my body. I can do whatever I want to, because I actually went through the process of rewiring my brain, body, and nervous system. Okay? There's a price tag on it, and most people, I don't think, are willing to pay that. They'll usually be willing to pay it once they've given the quick fix stuff, which the quick fix stuff is not presented as the quick fix. It's presented as the permanent fix, and that this is the best thing out there. But they've got to burn through that for a while, and that's okay. That's just human nature. I don't judge those people for that. I don't judge anybody for anything, especially because I've been through some really rough times in life, and I have a lot of compassion and empathy for people. But if I see those people doing those things, it breaks my heart, but I know that they're not ready yet. And it's all the people that come into my program and see the best results are always the people that have a history of trying the stuff that doesn't work, right? Whenever my team was on a call with people and they're like, I've tried acceptance, I've tried distraction, I've gone to therapy and talked about my childhood for X amount of years, or I've tried medication or whatever. Disclaimer, not telling you to not take medication. Listen to a licensed mental professional or a doctor about that. Not trying to dissuade you from taking meds. I think meds have saved people's life before, like anxiety meds and all that stuff. Just telling you that because you need to know I'm not like anti-meds or anything like that. But people try them and they mostly don't work as far as the people that I work with. Okay. They may mitigate sometimes, but they never eliminate their symptoms, and there can be all kinds of side effects and all that stuff. But anyway, talk to your doctor about that. But they've tried medication, they've tried random positive activities. Some people, I call them my high performance clients, they're just like, okay, well, I'll just do cold plunges. I'll just do sauna sessions. I'll just eat healthier. I'll just do this, this, and this. And that doesn't work because it's not things that are communicating safety to the body and nervous system, which are all the things that we're talking about. See, we have now spent I want to just, because I care about you, I want to tell you this. We've just spent 38 minutes talking about nothing but things that are going to help you recover. But your brain is not seeing that. And you think I'm holding out on something because you're still looking for some magical technique out there. That's not what heals your nervous system. It's self-regulation, co-regulation, exposure, and getting the right neuroscience. Again, some things I can give you for free, but other things I'll have to work with you. There's always, those are the four primary things, but I tell people I've got lots of people with existential OCD or harm OCD or symmetry OCD. We have several people with severe agoraphobia in the program. Some people, maybe they're diet is the biggest issue. Other people, they just really don't know who they are. They don't have a sense of self and they beat themselves up constantly. We need to do kind of some identity work, guys. Like, if I'm working with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, that's going to be different than if I'm working with a college kid or, somebody who works in a factory, right? Their lifestyle is different. Their understanding is different. So that's why coaching is really, really important. And also because co-regulation is 45% of recovery. Yes, I can give you some over these videos, but whenever I get to work with people and really just directly speak into their lives and their situation, it just brings co-regulation on a whole nother level. And in my meetings and the group calls, you get to be around people that are beating this in real time. And that just gives huge amount of co-regulation too. Um, but anyway, he dealt with the layers, okay? And the things that are going to cause you to really deal with the root of this are not the things that you think. You have a technique mindset. You have a method mindset. And I can show you major studies that show the methodology is only about 15% of healing. People heal people, that's 45%. Just to put this into perspective. But again, getting the right information is very important. Facing your triggers is very important. And then especially, yeah, we do need methodology though, and a body-based strategy is paramount. If you are not addressing what's happening in the body, even if you see temporary delays in symptoms, and sometimes that can last years, I'm telling you, you haven't recovered yet. And so you're either going to have to do the work now or in the future, you might as well do it now. Whether it's with me or somebody else, I don't care. I'm confident that I can deliver this transformation. If we can help you, we'd have to check out your situation. There's an application below. But I promise you, I got into this because I had gone through hell and I wanted to pay it forward. I never thought this was going to be my job. I wasn't looking for a job. I was looking to help people, and here I am 6 years later, and people keep getting their lives back, and I've wanted to quit this so many times it would make your head spin. This is extremely challenging, especially the finance stuff. God, I hate the finance stuff. I hate having to charge for what I do, but I've got a team, I've got a family. I have to make money from this. Like, and whenever I say make money, I mean enough to pay my stuff, guys. Uncle Sam, he don't play around, okay? And I don't have the energy to do everything by myself. That's why I've got a team that helps me. And so I would love to do this for free, but I just can't. I invest a lot of hours in this, and I'm literally pouring out my life for these people. And I do it because it's rewarding. And I feel like, which if you're not a spiritual person, that's okay, but I feel like God has called me to do this. I really do. And I've told God many times, I'm like, hey man, as long as you keep sending me people and they keep getting transformed, I'll keep doing this. But if people weren't seeing results, I would have walked away from this so quick, it would make your head spin. There have been so many times where I've been like, man, maybe I could just work at Burger King or something, man. Because this is a lot. Again, I have to be people's hope. I have to carry them on my back. And it's just very, very challenging until they can see results. And at any given time, I mean, I think right now, like at max, we're having about 30 people in a meeting and people slowly stop coming to meetings because they don't need them anymore because people are beating this. But I think in my program, at least in this group that I have here, I think it's like, anyway, I think it's like 140 people or something like that total. 160 people actually. And I created this group, I think a couple years ago. But anyway, but regardless, there's about, I think like 30 to 40 people that are showing up to meetings, but that's still a lot of freaking people. Okay. And, but it's working. And so anyway, with that being said, for those of you who follow me for a while, you probably noticed I've kind of shifted things in these most recent videos. And I've looked at the feedback because I do see what you guys say. And I mean, the comments have been great. You guys have indicated that you kind of like this style. I'm kind of doing more almost like a podcast style, more of like a conversation, just kind of speaking from the top of my head or reading an email or some comment or question that you guys give me. And if you guys continue to like this format, I'll do it. If not, I can go back to, kind of shorter videos or whatever. But anyway, I hope that you have enjoyed this and it's encouraged you. And there is nothing but hope for you, okay? No matter what your mind is telling you, you can get out of this. But we're going to have to deal with the root and do the work. And I'm going to do everything I can to make something available for me to help you. But if I can't help you, work with a licensed mental professional. You should do that anyway. But you get what I mean by that. You need these things in place. Body-based strategy is paramount, okay? Exposure to sensory triggers. We also couple that with relaxation as well in the body. It's very important. Getting the right information, which if you watch my videos long enough, you'll get the basic information. And then co-regulation. Somebody that can build hope in you, can build that secure attachment relationship. It's just so important. People heal people, right? How many things have you gone through in your life and somebody came alongside you and was just there for you? And just spoke just that statement that just gave you that hope. I'm telling you, I can tell you stories. And sometimes people didn't even say anything. They just were there for me. We are made to heal each other. You've been looking for the right method, but the right mentor matters. And if it ends up being me, that's great. And if it does, you can ask my clients, you better get ready for some terrible, corny jokes that aren't funny. You're going to have to stare at this thing that's going to probably break your camera. but I would love to consider your situation. Okay. There's a link to apply below if you want to work with me. There's also a free 5 shifts masterclass that is my gift to you. I spent 6 months on it, 12 hours a day. I wanted to make sure, yes, there is an invitation to work with me at the end, but regardless of that, it's literally going to add so much value to you, especially the education side of things. We go really deep on that. There's a link to that below as well. Let's make this the year that you get out of this. Okay. And I hope you have a great day. I'm going to go ahead and go, and we'll talk to you real soon.